Hello everyone, Vulcan here, and as promised, today I'm bringing you a new theory video. As the title of this video shows, I want to talk about possible ways in which Pyrrha will come back to the story, specifically two possibilities. The most common theory seems to be that Pyrrha will return as some form of Grimm, much the way Salem appears to be part Grimm herself. Another theory which I personally subscribe to, and one which I've mentioned either in a few of my past videos in the comment section, is that Pyrrha's consciousness still exists in Cinder in some manner, and potentially in RWBY as well. In this video, I'll be explaining what each theory entails and which one I believe is more likely to happen. However, before I delve into each theory, I want to point out that I would be more surprised if either of these theories actually come true and we will see Pyrrha returning. Pyrrha's death, while tragic, was a very significant event for the sake of the progression of Jean's development. Had Pyrrha remained in the story, Jean would always be the one being protected and coddled by her, and that's exactly what he didn't want. At the end of the day, while Pyrrha was training Jean to be stronger, she also cared too much for him to let him fight dangerous fights. While she did allow Jean to fight the Alpha Ursa in Volume 1, it was not without assisting him in secret, and we all know what happened in Volume 4. Because of this, I don't think Pyrrha would have allowed Jean to develop his strengths on his own and would have always acted as his training wheels even after he'd outgrown them. Pyrrha's death served to jumpstart Jean's growth because he knew that without her, he would have to learn to move forward on his own and develop his strength, as we see in Volume 4. And of course, the results speak for themselves. Pyrrha coming back for good would only serve to regress Jean's character and cause him to fall beneath her shadow. At best, if Pyrrha does come back on a permanent basis, it shouldn't be such that she would be able to stay with Jean indefinitely, or act as part of his team essentially. So the first and most common theory is that Pyrrha will return as a Grimm-human hybrid. The theory stems from the fact that Salem, while having a human form, has features which are very similar to the Grimm, namely the white skin and the red markings around her body. Her color scheme is also nearly identical to the Grimm. Because of these similar features, many people believe Salem herself is a mix between human and Grimm. But how does this mean Pyrrha will come back to life as the same kind of hybrid? Well, many are also speculating that Pyrrha didn't actually die when Cinder disintegrated her. Rather, the theory states that Pyrrha's body was teleported somewhere else, much the same way Cinder summons her weapons as if she creates them from nothing and disintegrates them when she doesn't need them anymore. In this way, Pyrrha was taken to the place where Salem is hiding. Pyrrha's body would then be recreated or reconstructed such that she'd be forced to do Salem's bidding, giving her the same appearance as Salem. However, this theory has some very obvious problems to me. The main issue is why. What made Pyrrha so special that Salem would specifically want her to act as her personal grunt, much like Maul was to Sidious in Star Wars? The only thing that made Pyrrha special compared to her peers was her incredible talent and her rather unique semblance, which made virtually any modern weapon almost useless against her. However, it was nothing overpowered or insurmountable the way Emerald's or Neo's semblances appeared to be, as Pyrrha would have no way of protecting herself from their abilities. In fact, it was because of Emerald that Pyrrha unintentionally killed Penny, which shows what kind of advantage illusions would have over polarity. Yet Salem shows no interest in Emerald besides the fact that she works under Cinder. Therefore, there's no reason to presume that Pyrrha's skills and natural talent were so vast that Salem would want her over anyone else just as talented, if not more so. Additionally, she could have made Cinder such a hybrid long ago if it were so easy to do so, if it's even possible. However, it's clear she chose not to for whatever reason. Perhaps Salem didn't have any specific interest in Pyrrha, for after all, how would she know she even exists? However, we do know that Cinder was adding students of Beacon Academy to a list in Volume 2. What this list was for is anyone's guess, as it was never touched on later in the series, though it definitely looked like they were scouting out students for an ulterior motive. It's possible that Cinder was scouting for potential additions to Salem's army of human Grimm hybrids, but the following question still stands. If Salem had any interest of doing such a thing, why hasn't she done so already? After all, there were plenty of options right in front of her, such as Cinder and Emerald, and she could have used someone else to carry out the undercover work in Beacon that led to the events in Volume 3. I also don't think this theory is likely, given that I believe Salem is much more than just a human Grimm hybrid, but rather the current incarnation of the God of Darkness. Salem's Grimm-like appearance is something I attribute to that possibility over anything else. After all, the God of Darkness was the one responsible for creating the Grimm in the first place. Therefore, it can't be an appearance that anyone else could have. If you would like to know more on this, do check out my video on Salem, which I linked in the description below. The other most common theory is Pyrrha's consciousness somehow carried over to Cinder and now exists within her. This is a theory I can see happening, and we've seen multiple hints of this in Volume 4. The most obvious hint is RWBY's dreams, hence why I think Pyrrha, or at least a part of her soul, could have entered RWBY. In these dreams, or nightmares, RWBY hears Pyrrha's final words to Cinder, which is interesting because RWBY couldn't have heard those words in person. When Pyrrha spoke those words, RWBY was still too far away to actually know what was happening on top of the tower, as shown by her shocked expression when she first made it there. In the second nightmare, we again hear Pyrrha's voice, this time shouting Jean's name as though she was worried he might be in great danger. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we see him training to her recording, all the while experiencing great inner turmoil moments later. So how could such a thing be possible? And when the only significant evidence we have pointing to this theory is RWBY's dreams, why would Pyrrha exist in Cinder? The first question is easier to answer, I believe. We know that maidens can transfer their aura and consciousness to the last person in their thoughts, given that said person is a young woman. If there's no such person, or if the person is either a man or a woman of age, the power will be transferred to someone random. It is my belief that Ozpin also has this power, as he's the current incarnation of the old wizard, except his aura and consciousness would be transferred to a young man instead of a woman. Because the last person in his thoughts were likely to be Cinder, it's possible that Ozpin's consciousness landed into Oscar randomly. Now in Volume 3, Pyrrha was in the process of forcibly receiving Amber's powers. It was also said earlier in the volume that there was a possibility that Amber's consciousness would be mixed with hers, potentially making her a different person entirely. The transfer was eventually cut short when Amber was shot through the heart, and Jean's to blame because he gave love a bad name. However, this doesn't mean Pyrrha failed to gain anything from the transfer. I believe it's entirely possible that Pyrrha did inherit some aspect of Amber's powers, and RWBY's dreams indicate the potential for Pyrrha to have gained the power to transfer her consciousness, even if only part of it, to someone else. The two most likely candidates to receive her consciousness were of course Cinder and RWBY, the former being her attacker and the latter being the very last person Pyrrha may or may not have seen before dying. RWBY's dreams of course suggest that she was the one to receive Pyrrha's consciousness, although we haven't been given any other hints in Volume 4 over whether or not this is the case. An example of a bigger hint would be Pyrrha speaking clearly in RWBY's mind like Ozpin is present in Oscar's. This is an indication that the failed transfer gave Pyrrha the ability to transfer her consciousness, even if just part of it, although it's also possible Pyrrha herself is confused enough that she hasn't emerged within RWBY just yet. After all, Ozpin didn't immediately talk to Oscar after he was supposedly killed by Cinder. It might also be possible that both RWBY and Cinder were in Pyrrha's thoughts. For instance, she may have been thinking RWBY and Cinder are now going to fight and was worried about what could happen to her friend once she's gone. As such, there's also the possibility that Pyrrha's consciousness split in two, one half moving to RWBY and the other moving to Cinder. This would also explain why neither have shown more obvious signs of the transfer's effects the way Oscar has. After all, when both only receive a part of Pyrrha's consciousness, Pyrrha herself can't be fully present in either of them. While RWBY's dreams are the biggest pieces of evidence for this theory, it's also worth noting that Cinder's character also appears to be much different than before. Granted, this could just be out of her sense of shame for having lost to someone like RWBY and her subservience to Salem, but it could also be more. One scene that's worth paying particular attention to is when Tyrion loses his mind and starts beating and stabbing a Grimm in a fit of madness and rage. Cinder, as we knew her in Volume 3, would have more than likely been apathetic to the scene, if not even taking joy from it. However, her expression in the scene is anything but that. Seeing someone who taunted and shamed her the way Tyrion did at the start of the volume being shamed in turn would make her feel as if he'd received his dues. We instead see shock, fear, and uncertainty, not at all in line with Cinder's meta. I think Pyrrha returning from within Cinder would also make for a very interesting twist. For instance, imagine Ranger finding itself in a situation where only Cinder would be in a position to save their lives. The part of Pyrrha that now exists inside her would want to do that, but she wouldn't be able to be with them and help them as part of their crew. It would also make for a very interesting dynamic between Jean and Cinder, especially as Jean will now have to move on knowing that Pyrrha is now with the enemy, if not an enemy herself. However, I do admit that there's a stronger chance that Cinder's change in character could also be the result of Amber's consciousness moving to Cinder, leaving RWBY to be the only recipient of Pyrrha's soul. So let me know what you think about these theories. Will Pyrrha return as a grim human hybrid, or will she make her appearance as a disembodied voice in Cinder or RWBY, or even both? Or maybe Pyrrha will return in a completely different way. Let me know in the comments section and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Also, do subscribe to my channel to see more discussions, theories, and reviews. I hope to see you all again soon and have a great day.